in your program in the materials, just very quickly so you know who's who and who's on first. From my far left, your right, Senator Tim Wirth, who is currently president of the United Nations Foundation, among many other things. Sitting next to Tim is Diana Aviv, who is president and CEO of the independent sector, something very dear to John. In the middle, the Honorable Bob Edgar, former congressman and currently president and CEO of Common Cause. And next to him, we have Mark Friedman, who's founder and CEO of Civic Ventures. And right on my immediate left, Milbrey McLaughlin, the David Jacks Professor of Education Emeritus, and perhaps most importantly, the founding director of the John Gardner Center for Youth and Their Communities here at Stanford. So everybody here has a very special connection with John. I can tell you as the moderator that he was a great friend and a role model. We first met in 1968. I was young and idealistic, eager to have an impact on the world. He was then 55 and idealistic, and he was having a huge impact on American society at that time. Clearly somebody that I admired and modeled my life after. He was an inspirational national leader, but he was so humble and approachable. He was a gifted writer and teacher. And his writings on leadership and renewal always resonate so strongly with me as just about the very best work in a crowded field. When I came back to Stanford to be dean, John encouraged me to teach an MBA class on leadership, something that I started doing 12 years ago and continue with great satisfaction. In fact, just had a class yesterday. And I know I've learned as much about leadership from teaching it as from practicing it. I'm sure John understood this. And much of my teaching really draws on his writing and on his personal example. And he reminded me, not that long ago in the start of my career, that the best leaders are incessantly teaching, and the best teachers are leading. And in that spirit, what we thought we'd do today is really reflect a bit on John Gardner, the teacher, because of the wonderful teaching he left behind. His writing was incredible. And some of his phrases, his observations have been quoted forever and ever by many, many people. We thought we'd pick a phrase and then let our panelists take off on that as they desire. But one of the things I think many of you have heard that John wrote was, you know, there are people in this world who just strengthen it just by being the kind of people they are. And I think our panelists are no exception. And I want to ask each of them to just start by how John really influenced and affected your life, made you the person you are today. So why don't we just start with Tim?
Oh, happy. Well, Bob, thank you very much, and thank you all very much for coming, Gardner. It's good to see you, and glad to have you here. See, we give our best to your mom and your grandmother. I was in the third class of White House Fellows. Bob was in about the fourth or fifth class, yeah, right? Yeah. And that was a program that Gardner had started, or convinced Lyndon Johnson to start. And the idea was to create what he called a cadre of inners and outers. People who would get themselves engaged in the government. And then after learning a lot about it, which is what you always do, you know, and making a contribution, you would go home and become an outer and then presumably go back and forth. And that was the purpose of the Fellows Program. I had been at Stanford when I became a fellow. I was a graduate student here, and a friend of mine from Stanford was in the first class of White House Fellows. And I said, if he can get a White House Fellow, I ought to be able to. That was the only reason I knew anything about it, was through the Stanford connection and Mike Walsh. Yeah. And I was very fortunate to be assigned to Gardner. Anyway, what happened to me was that my career just took, it took a totally different, not angle, but it just moved out so much more broadly as a result of that experience, that I wanted to be a university president, I thought, be involved in academia. And my world just broadened so significantly. And he was the reason that that happened. So there are a lot of tales that go along with that, but you say, what kind of an impact did he have? I mean, it had everything to do. I try to meet with the fellows every year, each class of White House fellows, and try to give them a sense of what the privileges that you and I had, Bob.
Thanks, Tim. Diana, how about you?
I had the opportunity to be connected with independent sector in 2003 for the first time, and knew that John Gardner had helped co-created independent sector with Brian O'Connell. And so for my first speech for the conference, I read every one of his books and tried to lay my hands on everything. And what struck me about it was the degree to which everything he said continued to be relevant and inspiring and enabling me to think about how I was going to do the work going forward of carrying the legacy. I think for the first time I understood what the word legacy really means. In creating this, in writing about it, where what he created with independent sector, which is the leadership forum of foundations, nonprofits, and corporate giving programs, reflecting the coming together of the sector on issues,